Welcome to today's episode. I'm Jackie Pack, and I'm happy to have you here listening. In today's episode, I'm going to be diving into a fundamental question. I found this coming up in my therapy sessions over the past month. And so I want to look at why people lie. I'm going to explore why children lie, why some adults never grow out of it, and the psychological functions that lying serves. Whether it's a white lie, a manipulation, or it's this deeply ingrained habit, understanding the roots of deception can help us become more aware of our own honesty and the honesty of those around us. Lying is an unavoidable part of human nature. We lie to protect, to avoid, to manipulate, and sometimes even to survive. But we need to understand what drives on dishonesty and how it shapes our relationships, recovery, and our self-perception. I think it's important to explore the psychology of lying and focus not just on why people lie to others, but why they also lie to themselves. Dishonesty often begins in childhood, when we learn to bend the truth, to avoid punishment, to seek approval, to avoid disappointing somebody that we care about, and maintain a sense of security. As we grow, lying becomes more complex, and it's influenced by. Often I will tell parents that I'm working with when their children lie to them, and they are very concerned about it. So I will talk to them about how children do lie. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we can project into the future whether this child is going to become a functional adult or to become a dysfunctional adult or to develop a habitual problem with lying. And often I will remind them that the good thing about our kids lying is they aren't very good at it. So we can usually feel that as parents, can often see through because they're not necessarily skilled at connecting different parts of the lie on a complex level. We can also usually reason through and understand that they are not being honest. But it's also, and I think it's important as parents to just recognize it is part of their development. They are going to do it. However, as the kids grow and they get older, lying becomes more complex, and it can be influenced by their personal experiences, fears, and social conditioning. Some lies do seem harmless, like exaggerating a story. But others can be deeply destructive and erode trust and integrity. I want you to reflect here for a minute before we go through this podcast episode and ask yourself if you can identify a time when you lied to yourself to avoid discomfort, or you lied to others to avoid discomfort. How that dishonesty, whether that was your own or somebody else's, affected your relationships. And if you haven't already, what steps can you take to create a stronger foundation of honesty in your life? Often I will say to clients, and I've probably said this in different podcast episodes on this podcast, I grew up in a family where what was happening in the family dynamics that I grew up in, we knew. I don't ever recall either of my parents telling us to not be honest about what the real family dynamics were. But I think we knew. And they probably made comments from here to there throughout the years about don't tell these people, or this doesn't leave this house, or things like that. I'm usually pretty open about the fact that for the first, 20, 25 years of my life, I would say I was dishonest. And now looking back at that time period, and I can look at the steps that I took to become more honest and to value honesty more, I was telling myself that it was harmless, but also I think that I came by my dishonesty honestly. That was part of my family dynamics, that we were expected to be dishonest about what was happening in our home. And so this isn't something that I'm preaching to you all about. This is something that I experienced as well, and that I work with clients who have engaged in lying or are learning to value honesty more and be better about being honest with the people in their lives. Like I said, lying is a universal human behavior. It has been studied across cultures, and researchers have found that deception is often used to navigate social complexity, meaning that people lie for a variety of reasons, including to avoid consequences, whether that's escaping punishment, like kids often do, embarrassment, which kids may experience as well, or to avoid accountability. There's some self-preservation that happens when people lie. They're protecting their self-image or their reputation. People also will be dishonest in order to gain an advantage, whether that's securing financial, social, or professional benefits. Sometimes lying happens in order to avoid conflict, to try to maintain peace in relationships, even if dishonesty is involved. And again, some people will rationalize that, thinking that the lie was harmless because otherwise there might have been conflict. And then sometimes people lie out of empathy and kindness, telling someone they look good even when they don't, or they're trying to spare their feelings. And we've all probably heard of this one where lying has become a compulsion. Often this is referred to as pathological lying. It's also known as pseudologia fantastica, when lying becomes habitual and even addictive. Lying, like I've said, is often an adaptive response to social and psychological pressures. But again, where does it begin? So let's go back and explore further why children lie. Children starting at an early age, often as soon as they develop the cognitive ability to understand that their thoughts are separate from others. The first lies usually appear around age 2 to 3, and they tend to serve specific developmental purposes. So they may be testing boundaries, lying to see what they can get away with. They might be avoiding trouble, and they will start to realize that lying can help them escape consequences. There also might be some creative thinking. Some lies will emerge as part of imaginative play and storytelling. And they also lie as a way to understand social rules. As children develop, they begin to use what we refer to as social lies to protect others. As I said, many parents worry when they catch their children lying, but often it's a sign of cognitive and social growth. The real issue here would arise when lying is not just a phase, but it's this persistent behavior into adulthood. If I'm working with parents, or the advice that I would give to you if you're listening to this episode, is we still need to teach our kids that we value honesty, which also means we need to be practicing honesty in our life. It means we also give them consequences when we catch them in a lie. And so we're not just recognizing it as a phase and allowing them to get away with it, or not teaching them that the value is in being honest, so that we can try to interrupt the possibility of it becoming a persistent behavior. Some people never stop lying, and their dishonesty can become more sophisticated and complex over time. The reasons behind chronic lying in adulthood are often linked to deeper psychological and emotional factors. What are some of those psychological and emotional factors? Well, we know that unresolved childhood patterns. So let's say if lying was reinforced in childhood as a way to avoid punishment or to gain approval, that may carry right into adulthood, and there's still lying in order to avoid punishment or to gain approval. It can also be a sign of low self-esteem, where some people lie to try to craft this version of themselves that they believe is more acceptable than what they believe they themselves are. Again, we will see lying in adulthood as a fear of consequences. Maybe somebody has experienced harsh judgment or punishment, and they lie as a necessary defense mechanism. Not that I'm saying it's necessary, but they would see it as a necessary defense mechanism or behavior. And then we have conditions like narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. These involve chronic deception as one of the factors that would indicate this diagnosis. Adults will also lie for reasons of power and control. They're lying in order to manipulate others or to maintain some type of dominance in their relationships. And then just like addiction to substances or other behaviors, some people will develop an addiction to lying, feeling this rush from deception. And sometimes this is mixed in with or co-occurring with other addictions that are there. They're also getting a hit or they're getting that rush when they're lying, and they also have a behavioral addiction or a substance addiction. We know that the more someone lies, the more likely they are to believe their own fabrications. And that makes it harder for them to break the habit. Going beyond the motives already discussed, another layer in the conversation about dishonesty is this interplay between lying, shamelessness, and the challenges of genuine change. I did a podcast episode, I think it's episode 299, it might be 298. It is 298, on toxic shame and healthy shame. And I talk about shamelessness. If you want a refresher on shamelessness, go back and listen to that podcast episode. When we're talking about lying and shamelessness, some of these concepts start to merge with each other. And we know that individuals can exhibit a level of shamelessness that makes their dishonesty particularly striking. This may not be about a lack of a moral compass, but it can be a sign of deeper issues like narcissism or chronic self-deception. In these cases, the lie is not a tool to avoid immediate consequences. It's a way to maintain self-image or this narrative that is so entrenched that it overrides any sense of remorse or shame. And this lack of shame can create a cycle where the individual continuously deceives without the internal checks that might otherwise lead to self-reflection and change. Society often loves the narrative of redemption and transformation. We easily can believe that someone has changed because it's a hopeful story and it might align with our desire to see the best in others. However, genuine change is neither quick nor simple. Real transformation requires a sustained period of honesty and accountability. And I often will tell people accountability usually precedes honesty. It's important to know that it's not enough to have a few isolated moments of truth. Consistent behavior over a long time is key. And I know sometimes when I'm talking about a long time, that may mean something different to another person. When I'm talking about a long time, I'm talking about several years. Sometimes people think 3 to 6 months. Another reason that we may believe that people have changed when in reality they have not is because of our own confirmation bias. We tend to see what we want to see. And in this way, confirmation bias can lead us to accept early signs of change without critically evaluating whether the transformation is deep or lasting. People will often rush to judgment and applaud minor improvements while ignoring these underlying patterns of deceit. For change to occur, individuals must be willing to confront their flaws openly, and this requires vulnerability, which can be a difficult state for those who have built their identity around certain lies. Only by being open to critique and self-reflection can someone truly move away from deceitful behaviors. And if you know somebody who tends to lie frequently, you have to keep this in mind. They have to be open to critique. They have to have some self-reflection over a period of time in order to really move away from these deceitful behaviors and go through a change process. People want to believe in change because of psychological, social, and emotional reasons. And we're often drawn to the idea that someone has changed because it taps into these deep-seated hopes, emotions, and cognitive shortcuts. What are some of the reasons why people might want to believe in rapid or dramatic change, even when genuine transformation takes time and sustained effort? Believing that someone can change offers this sense of hope and emotional relief. It supports the narrative of redemption, where even those who have erred can become better people. And I think often when we're in this place of believing people can change when they may not have gone through a genuine transformation process, usually this person is close in our life. It's somebody that we engage with somewhat regularly. Most of us aren't going to care that much or be that impacted if, say, the checker at the grocery store is a person who engages in dishonesty and deceit. We may not be impacted by a friend of a friend that we casually know, who we are aware engages in deceit. Often when we are giving people second chances that they may not have earned, it can also be linked to this hope that we have because we care about this person and we love this person. The idea of change allows us to extend forgiveness and to offer second chances. It reassures us that past mistakes don't have to define someone's entire future. And for some people, they are more self-reflective. They do listen to critique and they can take accountability. And they want other people to extend forgiveness and to offer them second chances when they mess up or when they make mistakes. And so often we will extend what we want, whether this other person has earned that or not. Also, the notion of change as a sudden or clear-cut event is often easier to grasp than the slow, messy process of real transformation. Our brains favor simplicity over the complexity of gradual development. And I think it's important to be aware that our brains favor simplicity. Our brain favors simplicity and black and white thinking. And most things in our world are not simple, and we cannot view them through black and white thinking. Once we decide to believe someone has changed, we will be prone to confirmation bias. So we might unconsciously seek out evidence that confirms this belief, and we will see the evidence that confirms our belief while downplaying or ignoring behaviors that suggest otherwise. I've played this role as the therapist when my client has been telling me things and their confirmation bias has kicked in and they believe things have changed, and that comes up in our sessions, the way that they are talking. And I may say, but didn't you tell me just last week that this person did this? It's not my role as a therapist to make the decision for this person about this relationship in their life. But it is my role to be a fair witness and to remind them what they've said that they could easily forget or put out of their mind because of confirmation bias. There's also social and cultural narratives that can make us prone to believing in this simplistic change. Many cultural narratives, whether that's from literature to movies, celebrate the redemption arc and reinforce the idea that change is not only possible, but it's admirable. These stories shape our expectations in real life. And sometimes that works against us. There's also some social cohesion that happens when we believe in the possibility of change. It can help maintain social bonds. It supports the notion that everyone deserves a chance to grow, which is essential for community and relationship building. It's also important to recognize how that growth needs to happen and that it's not a one-time event. Sometimes we will believe in this quick change shortcut because it reconciles contradictions and it reduces our cognitive dissonance. When we hold someone in high regard or we've invested emotionally in a relationship, learning about past wrongdoings can create cognitive dissonance. And human beings are pretty uncomfortable, which is why we call it cognitive dissonance. It's this internal discomfort where two thoughts compete with each other and contradict each other. Believing in change can help reconcile these contradictions, making it easier to move forward without the conflictions, the internal conflictions. Accepting a person's change provides a more consistent and less threatening worldview. It can tap into the psychological need we have for safety, and we're able to believe that individuals are not permanently fixed by their past mistakes, which I have to say, I believe that's true. I'm a therapist. I don't think it would be ethical of me to be a therapist and work with people who have made some serious mistakes in their life and done some damage and hurt people if I believed that individual behavior is permanently fixed. And that absolutely says something about who this person is at their core. I don't believe that. But I also expect the people I'm working with to move towards accountability. And I will help them in that process. And I can do that in the most non-judgmental way possible, while also pointing out the realities. Human beings also can fall prey to what is called the optimism bias. And many of us have this optimism bias. We prefer to believe that people can improve and that things can get better and that our world is safe. This desire for positive outcomes influences us to see change even when the evidence suggests that transformation is a long and ongoing process. Believing in change also aligns with many of our ethical ideals about growth, improvement, and the human capacity for learning from mistakes. While real change requires consistent work, self-reflection, and time, people often prefer the more comforting and straightforward narrative of transformation. This belief that change can happen with a single incident or two not only makes our social worlds more forgiving and hopeful, but also provides a simpler framework for understanding the complexities of human behavior. However, it also comes with the risk of being hurt again, of being deceived again, and the emotions that come with recognizing that you don't really know this person. Sometimes the most insidious lies aren't the ones that we tell others. They're the ones we tell ourselves. Self-deception can serve several psychological purposes as well, providing personal benefits, even when it means denying inconvenient truths. Often people lie to themselves to maintain a positive self-image or to justify decisions that might otherwise cause that internal conflict or cognitive dissonance. For example, admitting that we've made a mistake or we supported a harmful policy will create discomfort. I don't know of any human beings that like being wrong and freely admit that they were wrong about something. That usually causes some discomfort. I do know human beings who can get there, but I think the key word here is that they like being wrong. By convincing ourselves that our choices are sound, that we are informed, and that we are right, we protect our self-esteem and we avoid cognitive dissonance, that mental stress that arises when our beliefs conflict with our actions. When we're faced with evidence that challenges our views, especially in a highly polarized society like we have now politically, it can be easier to dismiss or reinterpret that evidence than to actually reconsider our deeply held beliefs. And we see this oftentimes, people making excuses for those that they believe in or those that, they identify with. This process, again, known as confirmation bias, means we are more likely to accept information that fits our existing narrative, even if it appears obviously false to outsiders. And the way those outsiders approach the disinformation that we believe in actually only entrenches us. So let me give some examples that maybe not everybody has even heard of. Some of you may have seen clips of, some of you may have read about. We have had current nominees to the Trump administration present narratives or claims that many outside observers find questionable. Some senators and political supporters may continue, however, to endorse these figures. I was watching I've watched several clips of several different nominees. And to me, there's varying levels of what I perceive to be some obvious lies. And it caused me to reflect as I was talking to my kids. And I said to them, I think I would have been in high school or maybe just newly graduated. Hang on, I'm going to look this up. I was a little bit older than I thought I was. It happened not that much older. It happened in 1991. And I do recall watching Clarence Thomas's confirmation to the Supreme Court, those hearings, and Anita Hill had stepped forward. She had worked for him in several different organizations, and she was accusing him of sexual harassment in the workplace. And watching it, even then, I was not a trained therapist then. I would have been 21. That's pretty young. But I remember watching it and feeling that she was a lot more believable than he was. Also, for me as a female, thinking to myself, why would you come forward and make this accusation if it's not true? Because again, she got some pretty big pushback from people. So I was telling my kids, this has been happening, I feel like my whole adult life, where there are people being nominated for very powerful, very important and influential positions in our country. And when they are questioned, when something of a black mark in their history comes up, they don't own it. They take no accountability. They deny it. And to me, their dishonesty and their lies seem almost childlike in that they are so bad. And I'm watching these other people in the government, the senators who are doing the confirmation hearings. And I can't say that they believe the lies. I think maybe some of them do. But I think some of them don't care, which is a little bit more concerning to me. We're at a place in time where there are current nominees who are going before the committees in the Senate, and they are presenting narratives or claims that for many of us just look questionable and sometimes blatantly dishonest. However, some senators and political supporters will continue to endorse these figures, and they may even say, I don't think they were lying. Maybe they don't do so out of blind loyalty. Maybe some of them may do it out of blind loyalty, and we've certainly seen where they are saying Trump was elected president, which he was, and therefore he gets whatever he wants. Our government has never been designed to be set up and run that way. The president doesn't get whatever they want, which is why we start learning in maybe junior high, but for sure we learn in high school about the checks and balances and how our founding fathers set up a system based on checks and balances, which would say the president doesn't get to do whatever they want. I think accepting the problematic aspects of these nominees would force a reckoning with policies or actions that they've long supported, whether that's the viewer or whether those are the senators. In this way, self-deception serves as a protective mechanism, allowing them to reconcile their public positions with their internal doubts without having to dig too deep to have self-reflection and self-awareness. Self-deception in politics can also be driven by a strong sense of group identity. For senators and political leaders, acknowledging the flaws or dishonest narratives of their chosen nominees can threaten the cohesion and the values of their party. By believing the narrative, even when it seems overtly misleading, they reinforce group solidarity and their own alignment with the group's ideological stance. This creates a feedback loop. The more they deny the obvious, the more they commit to the group's identity and the personal benefits that come with belonging to that tribe. Admitting that one has been misled or that one's beliefs were based on falsehoods can carry a heavy emotional and political cost in this situation. For individuals in positions of power, this admission might also lead to a loss of credibility. Thus, self-deception not only protects the individual's self-image, but it also preserves their status and influence within their community or their political faction. In essence, lying to oneself isn't always about outright denial. It's often a sophisticated subconscious balancing act aimed at maintaining internal consistency and personal benefit. Whether in everyday interactions or high-stakes political arenas, the lie we tell ourselves can be as powerful and as hard to overcome as any lie that we might tell others. Let's pivot away from political things, although I have been having a lot of those conversations in my sessions the last couple of weeks. And as I explain the complexities of this and the different psychological reasons why this may happen, often they're not feeling more hope. They don't feel like they have a clear plan of action in their life. And I don't know that they should. What I have been saying is it is important for you to take care of yourself because, yeah, these can be some very dark realities that we're seeing play out. And that, we have to decide how much of our emotional energy we give to this. With many of my clients, I'm telling them, you still have to go to work. You still have to make a living. You have kids to care for. You have a spouse. You have work that you're supposed to be doing. I tell them, get sleep. Sleep is important for our physical health and our emotional health. Stay hydrated. Move your body. Eat healthy. Disconnect from what is happening in the world, in the larger world around you, and connect with the people in your immediate life. I want to pivot here away from the political scene and the dishonesty that's playing out there into more of the people that I work with and human behavior in general. And look at the lies that we tell ourselves when we aren't in powerful leadership positions. Self-deception serves as a coping mechanism. And it does help individuals avoid painful truths, unresolved trauma, or personal accountability. In relationships and recovery, this can be especially damaging. For example, someone struggling with addiction may tell themselves they have it under control. when what they need to see is the reality that this is unmanageable and that they alone cannot change or stop this or make it any different. A betrayed partner might rationalize their partner's behavior to avoid facing the depth of their pain and the decisions that they need to make. An individual in a toxic relationship might convince themselves that things aren't as bad as they seem, or maybe if they just tweaked or changed a few things about themselves, the relationship would be healthier. Lying often goes hand in hand with rationalization. When people engage in harmful behaviors, they find ways to justify them, often convincing themselves that their actions are necessary or even moral. This can be particularly evident in high-stakes environments like politics that I talked about, in business, and in our relationships where we can feel very vulnerable. We see this dynamic play out when individuals in positions of power manipulate narratives to protect themselves or justify unethical behavior, defending actions that can be in many cases indefensible. Highlights how self-interest can override truth and honesty. Recovery, whether from addiction, betrayal, trauma, or personal growth, requires a deep commitment to honesty. Facing the truth, especially the truth we resist the most, can be uncomfortable and painful. But honesty is the foundation for healing, intimacy, and personal transformation. I've talked before in different episodes about the window of tolerance. Let me just give a brief summary. Basically, the window of tolerance stems from polyvagal theory in neuroscience. When we are in our window of tolerance, we feel okay. We're not emotionally dysregulated. Our fight, flight, and freeze system is not activated. Our threat system is not activated. We don't feel hyper aroused. We don't feel hypo aroused. We don't have to necessarily feel great, but we feel safe. We feel fine. Now, with many of the they don't have a full understanding of the truth or the reality of the story that they were born into, the family dynamics that they were growing up in. And some of that may have led them into addictions, into toxic relationships, into betraying or being betrayed. And so we're working with the present to stabilize that. And then we also start to pivot into the past to gain more information about the patterns that are actually being replicated so that we can have that knowledge and work towards change. One of the things I will often tell them is the truth may be really painful, but I found this for myself. I also find this, and I observe this with clients all the time, where there might be a painful truth or a painful reality that they're coming to, but it actually settles them. It actually makes them more regulated in their body. And some of the dysregulation has been happening because they're living with a story that they were given, but it's not real. It's not true. And their body knows that. Like I said, honesty is the foundation for healing, intimacy, and personal transformation. And some key steps to this include recognizing when we're engaging in self-deception and understanding the underlying fears that drive our dishonesty. Sometimes these underlying fears were true in childhood or even in our teen years. But as adults, we can be capable of handling a lot more honesty. We can engage in that ourselves, but we can also start to understand some of the dishonesty that we were given. It's important to create safe spaces for truth-telling in relationships as well. And then practicing radical honesty with ourselves, even when it is difficult. Dishonesty is deeply woven into human behavior, but so is the capacity for truth, accountability, and change. By understanding why we lie, whether that's to others or to ourselves, we can begin to make conscious choices that foster authenticity, trust, and deeper connections. The journey toward honesty isn't always easy, but it is one of the most powerful steps towards healing and integrity. Change is not easy, and the path to honesty is fraught with setbacks. It requires not only an external shift in behavior, but also an internal commitment to examining one's motivations and fears. As listeners, it's important to understand that while we may be tempted to believe in a quick transformation, sustained change demands time, self-awareness, and a willingness to challenge our own biases. People will often develop an ability to check in with their body, tuning into subtle signals that might indicate whether someone is being honest. This happens through a combination of mindfulness, self-awareness, and experience. I'll have clients who will ask me, is it okay for me to ask this person if they're lying to me? And based on the person, based on the situation, sometimes I say, I don't know that you have the relationship with that person to ask such a direct question. Sometimes I may say, I don't think that by asking that question, you're actually going to get an honest response. Do you want to know what they're going to say if you ask the question, or are you trying to get to the truth? Because those are two different things. You might ask the person knowing that they may or may not give you an honest response. But if you are trying to get to the truth by going through them, I don't know how reliable that is. If you're having to ask somebody if they're lying about one thing or another, I'm assuming, or I'm guessing here, that you have a reason to think that they are being dishonest or that they are lying to you. And so would then simply responding to your question make you believe them or make you feel like you have the truth? Usually the answer I get is, well, no. And then I say, right, because you have to do the harder work of connecting with your body and being able to check in and trust what your body is picking up. Here's a breakdown of why this works and why it can be effective. Interoceptive awareness refers to the ability to recognize, interpret, and understand the signals coming from within your own body. These signals can include things like your heartbeat, your breathing patterns, hunger, thirst, and even subtle muscle tensions or emotional responses. Here's a closer look at the concept. We're looking at internal sensation recognition. That's the skill of noticing these internal sensations and physical states of your body. For example, being aware of a flutter in your stomach when you're nervous, or a quickened heartbeat when you're excited. Interoceptive awareness is a key part of how we understand the connection between our mental and physical states. It helps us interpret emotions, like recognizing that a tight chest might be related to anxiety, and it can guide our responses in various situations. This does require a connection between both mind and body. By being more attuned to these internal signals, individuals can manage their stress better, they can make healthier decisions, and respond more adaptively to emotional challenges because they are more emotionally regulated. And these things will develop through practice. Practices like mindfulness, meditation, yoga, or other body-focused activities can enhance interoceptive awareness, helping people become more in tune with the subtle cues that their body sends. In essence, interoceptive awareness is like having this internal radar that continuously monitors how you're feeling physically and emotionally, which can be crucial for your overall well-being and for making decisions based on those feelings. Our gut feelings are informed by both these physiological responses and our past experiences. As people grow more aware of these signals, they can often detect when something feels off in their interactions, even before logical reasoning kicks in. Learning to recognize and name one's own emotions can improve overall body awareness. As people become more skilled at identifying their emotional responses, they can also better interpret physical cues associated with the emotions. Over time, individuals accumulate experiences of trusting or being deceived by others. Reflecting on these interactions can help connect the dots between bodily sensations and the truthfulness of an interaction, sharpening the intuition for future situations. Why can this body awareness often be more effective than just directly asking a question? When you ask someone if they're being honest, their verbal response is often filtered through conscious thought, social expectations, and sometimes a desire to present themselves in a favorable light. In contrast, bodily responses like changes in our heart rate or muscle tension tend to be more spontaneous and less easily controlled. Our bodies pick up on nonverbal signals, things we call microexpressions, which are tone of voice, body posture, that we may not consciously register. This somatic information can provide clues about honesty that might be missed if you rely solely on what someone is saying or what's happening in the conscious conversation. Asking someone directly if they're being honest can also put them on the defensive or lead to rehearsed responses. Meanwhile, our internal bodily cues can give us an instinctive sense of discomfort or reassurance that isn't easily manipulated by words. But there are things we may encounter in our day-to-day life that disconnects us from our bodies and makes us susceptible to deception. High stress levels or chronic anxiety can drown out these subtle body cues. When your body is in a constant state of fight or flight, it is hard to distinguish between signals that are due to stress and those that are relevant to the current interaction. We can also overthink things or be distracted. In fast-paced, information-heavy environments, people often rely on rational analysis and external cues rather than checking in with their internal states. This cognitive overload can lead to a disconnection from our body's natural signals. Some cultural or social norms also discourage paying attention to one's internal states, favoring logic and rationality over intuition. This can cause a disconnect, making it harder to trust one's own bodily insights or to even be aware of them when evaluating others. And past trauma and negative experiences can lead some people to shut down and to completely disconnect from their body, ignoring bodily sensations as a protective mechanism. This emotional numbing, while helpful in avoiding pain, can reduce sensitivity to cues that might otherwise alert them to dishonesty or deception. Learning to check in with one's body involves a deep, mindful awareness of internal signals and practicing that over time so that we trust that. Because these cues are more spontaneous and less subject to manipulation, they can be remarkably effective in detecting dishonesty. However, modern stresses, overthinking, and even cultural conditioning can sometimes disconnect us from this internal compass, leaving us more vulnerable to deception. How can we address lying if we think that somebody or we feel that somebody is being dishonest? There are a few strategies that can help us respond to dishonesty in some effective ways, or in more effective ways. But it's not a quick fix. We have to create environments where truth-telling is both valued and safe. This encourages honesty. Responding with curiosity instead of judgment. And this both goes for the words we use as well as the tone that we have. We might ask why someone feels the need to lie rather than simply punishing them. This is where boundaries also become important. If someone repeatedly lies in harmful ways, it is important to establish clear boundaries about how you are going to respond. Chronic lying can indicate deeper psychological struggles that may also require professional guidance to fully address. As I've talked about, lying is a deeply human behavior. It's shaped by biology, social structures, and personal experiences. While occasional dishonesty is normal, chronic or manipulative lying can erode trust and damage relationships. By understanding the motivations behind lies, the role of shamelessness, and the real challenges involved in changing behavior, we can foster more honest and authentic connections with others and with ourselves. Thanks for joining me in this episode. If you found it interesting, please share it with someone who might appreciate the insights. Go to our YouTube channel, subscribe. I'm trying to build my subscribers on the YouTube platform, where you can not only listen to the podcast episode, but you can watch the video of it. It is free to subscribe. And then also follow Healing Paths Recovery on our social media platforms, both Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. At the end of this episode, I want to remind you that your story matters. Remember, there's something meaningful in every chapter. Don't wait to share your story until it's finished. As always, stay curious, stay honest, and until next time, Jackie.